Let me introduce our wonderful guest speaker here. His name is Vin D'Eleto. Vin founded WordAgents in 2014. His SEO obsession borderlines addiction, and the journey of helping clients uncover hidden SEO opportunities and directing his team of writers to produce impactful content never fails to excite him. Vin's company, WordAgents, provides premium content for small businesses, agencies, publishers, and e-commerce companies, all written by American writers. The show is yours, Vin. Passing you the mic.
Thanks, Bernard. That was an awesome intro. I appreciate that.
Of course, always.
Well, hey, everybody. My name is Vin. I'm from WordAgents.com. Like Bernard said, we're a content creation service. We specialize in SEO optimized content at scale. All of our writers at WordAgents are generalists. We don't have any subject matter experts. So we usually deal with bulk level work, product descriptions, affiliate content, awareness content, top funnel style stuff. We don't usually touch, copywriting or sales focused writing or branded content too much. But today, the topic of our presentation is common mistakes when working with freelance writers. I think regardless of the market that you serve, the types of writers that you work with, there's a core set of common issues that everybody experiences when outsourcing content creation to a freelancer. So I think I've got about 8 common issues that we'll go through today. And we'll just talk about what the problem is and then what I think the solution is, just based on my experience with WordAgents over the years. So let's jump in here. Okay, a little bit more about me. So WordAgents life. We've been doing WordAgents since 2009. It's taken several different lives over the years, I guess you would say. I started as a sole proprietor. I was a writer myself, and then I bootstrapped the business from there. We became a bespoke agency after that. And then recently in late 2019, early 2020, we pivoted over to a productized service, which is how we operate today. But over the life of WordAgents, we've created well over 100 million words of written content for our clients. Currently, we're doing between 4 and 5 million words written per month. We've worked with over 3,000 clients over our lifetime. I believe our active client list is somewhere around 1,200 right now. And we currently have 200 plus full-time writers on staff at the moment. Beyond WordAgents, I've got some other entrepreneurial endeavors, obviously WordAgents.com. But I also own a portfolio of publishing and affiliate content sites. So a big thing for me at WordAgents is we want to walk the talk, right? So we don't want to just say, hey, we're SEO experts unless we're actually doing SEO. So beyond our blog at WordAgents, I also operate a portfolio of 5 to 6 authority sites in different niches that help me keep my skills sharp. And then also as a passion project, I opened up a Japanese izakaya restaurant, which is just a traditional Japanese pub. And that's here on Long Island, New York. All right, so let's jump into our first common issue with dealing with freelance writers. Number one, writers are not project managers. So the problem here is freelance writers are often assigned project management related tasks in which they're not suited for, right? So writers, when you deal with freelance writers, you're obviously working within a budget and you want to maximize that budget. The best way to do that is to make sure that writers are only doing what they're good at, which is researching content and writing content. So, to make sure that you're not kind of assigning tasks that are not appropriate for your writer, what you want to do is you want to review your standard operating procedures, and you want to identify any project management tasks that should be removed. These types of tasks, these types of workflow tasks should be owned by your editorial manager, your project lead. The roles in your organization will change dependent on how big your content marketing program is. But the key point is that writers should write and research and nothing else. So if you have writers like building Trello boards or doing some kind of reporting, that's out of scope for what you want them to do. And you're really kind of like shooting your budget in the foot by having them handle project management tasks. So that's a big one. That's something that it took us to learn. It took us a while to learn. So you'll definitely reduce expenses and improve ROI if you're keeping all your roles in the content marketing program in their unique lane. Cool. So that is number one here. Let's jump over to number two. Set expectations, keep them concise. And I tried to show that within the title of this slide as well. But the problem here is writers are not provided proper briefings. They're provided briefings that are too long-winded and or provided briefings that lack all expectations of the client. So really the problem here is, get your briefings organized, guys. Again, keep in mind, what you hired the writer to do. Writers are not content strategists. Sometimes, they don't know what you want, so we can't assume that they know what you need. So you just want to give them exactly what they need and nothing that they don't. So we're going to go into this in detail a little bit. What I've outlined on part two of this issue are the different parts, the different elements of a briefing that are typical for any freelance writer. So let's just go through these points one by one real quick to expand on each of them. So briefing document in general, you want to keep it to 2 to 3 pages max. Anything beyond that, you're getting into micromanagement territory. I'm getting a lot of notifications here, Bernard. I don't know if that's the chat. Gotcha.
Yes. People are asking questions, and I'm telling them we'll get around to them at the end.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
We have some time carved out at the end to answer all of your questions, so we'll make sure we get to all of them before we sign off today. But keep them going in the chat. Bernard's tallying them up for us. But yeah, getting back to the point here, you want to keep the documents to like 3 pages max. You don't want to micromanage. The point being is you can't expect a writer to create an article in the exact same way that you have in your mind. Again, this is something that I learned through tough experience. As a writer myself, I built up my own tone of voice, my own writing style, my own writing chops, and then I assumed I could just kind of pass that off to all the freelancers that I hired. But that's simply not the case. You have to leave room for personal writing style of the freelance writer. So that's why we kind of systemize our briefings, and we just keep them as concise and succinct as possible. So getting into the actual elements here, we have our due date, obvious, a brief or a description. A lot of people forget that they just need a basic description of what you're trying to accomplish with the article that you're outsourcing. So just, a basic 1-paragraph description about the goals and the purpose of the article itself. Sometimes, if you have a larger content marketing program, you'll have standard operating procedures for each type of article that you create or each of your content types within your organization. So sometimes you're going to want to include article-specific direction beyond the generalized instruction for the content type. Word length, how long the article should be. The pay rate, obviously, how much the writer is going to get paid for the article. The publishing site, where the article is going to be published ultimately. Your target and secondary keywords, along with any instructions for keyword density. I know these days we have ClearScope that tells us this, which makes life so easy, but everybody has their own rhyme and reason to keyword density. So if you have specific ideas about keyword density, you want to include that in your briefing. Target persona, that will be your general buyer persona, your target demographic for the article. The funnel position, is this top, middle, bottom funnel piece of content? Are we talking awareness content for somebody that has no idea about your solution? and you just got to introduce them to the topic in general? Or do they already know that they are interested in ClearScope or your product or your service, and is this article really to convert them? So you got to let the writer know the funnel position as well. And as I alluded to before, content type. If it's an awareness piece, you're talking listicles, blog posts, how-to articles. If we're talking middle funnel, you're talking transactional reviews, reviews of the service itself. And of course, bottom funnel, you have your landing pages and sales pages. Examples are huge. And for guys like me that are running teams, examples are the easiest and fastest way to get on the same page with you, the client. So this could be a topic example, whether it's a competitor. If you're targeting a target keyword, you have your top 10 competitors right there. Pass those over to the writer in the briefing, as well as structure. As content marketers and SEOs, we're all about content that could be easily scanned, setting up structure for feature snippets. But writers don't have these skills internalized. So giving them example of how the article should look and key elements that you want included in your article. Again, just an example of a live article is the easiest way to close that knowledge gap. Optional step, article outline. If you want to outline the exact article with the headings and the information that you want the writer to follow. That's bordering micromanagement territory, but it'll definitely get you closer to your exact vision than if you don't include an article outline. Beyond that, we have internal and external linking instructions. Your rules for internal links, external links, how to choose external links, how to choose anchor text. Again, tools like ClearScope can help you out there. Tone of voice instructions. This should be like a loose guideline. Again, I like to include examples of tone of voice that I want the writer to emulate. But again, you do want to leave some room for their personal writing style and not try to micromanage too much there. And then finally, any resources you have. If you did any interviews, if you dug up your own studies or did your own database studies for the piece, you want to include that in the briefing as well. And for the most part, guys, at WordAgents, when we get a briefing with all of this included, we very rarely get revision requests, just because we have a clear vision of what you want, and just makes it so much easier to get us on the same page with you to make sure that that first draft is as close to publish ready as possible. And then we could use revisions or whatever you work out with your writers as far as revision work, to really just polish it up and get it ready for publishing, rather than making like wholesale changes because the initial instructions were kind of off base. Okay, I think that's plenty to talk about briefings there. So let's move on to the next issue. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. This one's specifically for organizations that have larger teams. But if you're going to scale your content marketing program, you're going to need infrastructure and supporting characters beyond your writers. Typically, what do I have here? Once you get past like 8 to 10 writers, or that was in my case, that's what the cutoff was. You're going to start to not be able to manage it yourself, especially if you're the owner of the business and you have all kinds of other things to worry about. So around 8 to 10 writers, you're going to need some help there. So the problem is high volume content production requires supporting staff and tools beyond the freelance writing role. So what are these supporting roles? They could be an editor position, editor, proofreader. This is just, for line editing, copy editing, proofreading, tone of voice style, comparison of instructions and needs against the deliverable. That would all be something the editor would be responsible for. You have the content or editorial manager. This is really like your content marketing program lead. So that they would sit above the editor role. But sometimes that's the same. Sometimes the editor is the editorial manager, depending on the size of your organization. But really, the editorial manager is managing the entire system, including the creation of processes, systems, hiring, firing, and so on and so forth. When you get to a large team, you're gonna have to break it down into sub teams, and when you get to that point, you're gonna need team leaders. So team leaders could be editors, but in this case, they're just gonna be responsible for the same writers all of the time. At WordAgents, we have a ratio of 1 editor to every 10 writers, and they act in the team leader capacity. So again, the editors can act as a team leader, but depending on the size of your organization, you may need to split those roles up depending on how many tasks you have within your program. And then finally is the project lead. And this is just a project management role. And this would be necessary, you know, again, if the pure volume of projects you have going on is too much for your editorial manager to handle on their own. So in this case, a project manager would, there would be a project manager assigned to each project, and then the editorial manager would be in charge of the project managers. So it's just like your standard pyramid style growth. You know, as you grow, you're building more bases beneath you, and it's all, you know, purely determined by the size of your content team and program. And then beyond roles, beyond human labor, there's obviously tools to help you leverage your content team. First and foremost, you know, in the SEO world, we have the SEO optimization tools like ClearScope. We use ClearScope. Man, the stuff that ClearScope does for me is probably clearing about 2 to 3 hours of article setup time per article. Prior to optimization tools, my team was doing this manually. You know, analyzing SERPs, going into Ahrefs, pulling data, cross-referencing data from different tools, and building the reports that ClearScope builds for you at pretty much at the push of a button. So first and foremost, from an SEO standpoint, ClearScope is dope. It's awesome. We also have project management tools, Trello boards, Asana. ClickUp is another one that's really good. It's new on the scene. I haven't used ClickUp personally. Monday.com is similar as well. But once you get past, you know, 10 members in your team, you got to kind of get away from Google Sheets and move towards a proper project management system. HR, believe it or not, an HR system is so helpful for managing a content team. At WordAgents, we use a solution called Bamboo HR. I know there's another platform called Breezy. The guys at the Hawk use Breezy. But it's a lifesaver. You know, imagine having 100 writers and they have various like time off requests or personnel issues, and they're all emailing you nonstop, and on top of all their project questions, an HR platform really helps to kind of smooth that out. Beyond that, you have plagiarism tools like Copyscape or Grammarly, making sure there's no duplicate content in the articles that the freelancers produce. Editing and proofreading tools. At WordAgents, we use Grammarly exclusively, so that's my recommendation there. And then readability. We all know that, you know, depending on the audience, you're going to want to craft your readability for that audience, depending on their reading level. So if it's a professional outlet, you're going to be at a higher college level reading level. And if you're speaking to, you know, so, you know, a general audience, I think a general audience reading level is anywhere between like 8th and 10th grade. So a readability tool that will scan your article and tell you, you know, what grade level the article is from a readability perspective is huge. And for that, we use Hemingway Editor. That one is free and it gets the job done. All right, so we talked about supporting characters. Where are we going next here? Next slide. Test, evaluate, and revisit. So the problem here is that freelancer writing quality is dynamic and changes over time. I think a lot of people that start hiring freelancers for the first time kind of assume a set it and forget it type deal. That's not the case, unfortunately. You constantly have to monitor the quality of your freelancers over time to ensure that they're staying that they're meeting your expectations. So the way we do this is we test, evaluate, and revisit. Initially, when we're interviewing applicants, we're testing them with 1 to 5 test assignments, and the number of test assignments is purely dependent on the number of content types you have in your organization. At WordAgents, we stick with like basically more or less 5 basic content types. So when we are evaluating and testing writers, they're getting one type of article for each test. Then we evaluate them. We have a whole evaluation team for this. But at the most basic level, you just want to set up evaluation criteria, like an evaluation checklist, and then just go down that checklist again, cross-reference it against each test assignment that they created, and just give them a basic score. There should be 0 like judgment calls in evaluation. It should be score based, and it's a pass or fail type thing. And because there's so many freelancers out there, you don't want to spend too much time on the evaluation process, but evaluations are very important. So creating like a score matrix for your evaluation criteria is the best way to get to a pass fail type of deal. And ideally, you want to have multiple people evaluate the same documents. So if you have an editor, a content manager, and a team leader, have all 3 of them go through the evaluation process, because each of them is going to have a different perspective on the candidate. And then at that point, once you evaluate, you're going to find some winners and you're going to onboard them to your team. But down the line, we like to revisit those evaluations. And the way we do that is we perform monthly or quarterly evaluations to identify drops in quality. So we'll just cherry pick a project that the writer completed for us, and we'll run the evaluation criteria and see how they're doing from a long-term perspective. At WordAgents, as a matter of practice, we turn over the bottom 10% of our team every quarter. So what we do is we evaluate, we grade, the bottom 10% of the team gets jettisoned out, and then we bring in new fresh blood to hopefully elevate the quality of our team as a whole. So that's very important, especially the revisit step there. Okay, moving on to our next issue, hiring the right skill set and specialization. Guys, people love to talk about the differences between like content mills, marketplaces, job sites, generalists versus subject matter experts. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that there's an ideal tool for every job. It's up to you as the business owner or the content manager to find that right tool and apply it to your project. So the problem here is there's a mismatch between the skill sets and specializations of the freelance writer compared to the project at hand. Freelancers are not one size fits all. Okay, so there's no one solution here. It's you kind of have to use your judgment to find the best tool for the job based on what the job is. So you're going to want to rely on tests instead of rates or testimonials. Just because a writer has a high rate does not indicate quality at all. And of course, if a writer has a testimonial section, they're only going to show the best, highest quality testimonials. So the best way to analyze their ability is by testing them. Subject matter experts should not write on the topic, should only write on the topic they specialize in. If you're going to give subject matter experts like easy tasks like product descriptions or just easy repetitive monotonous work, you run the risk of losing them because it's not going to interest them and it's not going to keep them engaged with you and your company and what you're doing. So it's, and also you're kind of spending too much. Why you're going to spend SME type prices when you can use a generalist for easy work. And then the inverse is also true. Generalists are easy to scale, more easy to scale than SMEs. And generalists work for most projects if you leverage their individual skill sets. So again, this comes down to testing and understanding the skill sets of your generalist writer. If you have a big organization, it's going to be so tough to find that many subject matter experts that can write well, wants to work long term, and you know is interested in that work. Generalists are pro writers. They have the chops for spelling, grammar, and writing skills. And then you just got to find out where what type of content they'll be best suited for. So again, clear that depending on the job, the job sets the tone for the type of freelancer you use. And then the bottom 2 points here, I have subject matter and copy editor combo. And that means that if you're dead set on using an expert, you can get around them having poor writing skills if you pull in a copy editor to polish up their work. So we've done this in the past in a previous iteration of WordAgents. We had subject matter expert teams in the legal space. And I found that attorneys were very poor blog post writers. So what we did is we pulled down a copy editor to take their initial draft and polish it up into something that was published ready. But that put us on razor thin margins from an ROI perspective. And then the alternative is, or the inverse is, the generalist and expert combo. Generalists will craft a really well-written article, but they may lack the expertise. So in that case, you can just hire an expert to vet the article and fact check for you. So you can send generalist articles over to the expert, pay them a flat fee per article, and have them fact check. And if revisions are necessary, you can send it back to the generalist to do some fact checking and deeper research. And if not, it's published ready. All right, so we're moving on to the next one here. I know we're short on time, so I'll try to kick it up here. Written agreements keep everyone honest. Guys, you got to have your agreement in writing with your freelancers. Just 1 second. It would be perfect to have a virtual handshake agreement with everybody, but it just doesn't work out that way. And with everything else you have going on in your content marketing program and your business in general, it's going to be real hard to keep writers honest without an agreement. So some kind of binding agreement is necessary with every freelancer, whether it be a writer or any other freelancer that you hire for your organization. When it comes to writers specifically, you want to make sure that your agreement outlines pay rates and dates, deadline dates, and how they're calculated. You want to outline revision and quality assurance requirements and the expectations placed on the freelancer. Deadline expectations and what happens when they're missed. Maybe that triggers like a you dock them some pay, or some other repercussion from missing a deadline. Response time expectations. This one is huge. A lot of freelancers, for whatever reason, once they get hired and they get to work, they become unresponsive until the deadline. And clearly that's an issue for multiple reasons. So you need to outline in your agreement your response time expectations. At WordAgents, we require all freelancers to respond to any communication within 24 hours. That includes weekends. So again, that's going to be determined by your needs for the project, but you definitely want to have response time expectations in your agreement. Your non-disclosure agreement or clause, and in certain cases a non-compete. Obviously, you have your own IP. You have your own special sauce that you need to convey to the freelancer. So in the agreement, there needs to be a clause that states that they will not share that information with anybody else or use that information to compete against you. And again, you want to outline the reasons for potential termination of the contract. So any type of breach of contract that you want in there, to just let the writer know ahead of time that if you do this, we're going to cancel the contract, and there's not going to be any pay for this because you're in breach of the agreement. In general, guys, you don't want to let writers manage you. Lots of writers will try to adjust your workflow to better meet their needs, but at the end of the day, that's going to cause hell for you. And it might be doable, if you're only working with one writer or two, three, four, five. But once you get into bigger teams, you have to manage the writers. They have to do things the way you set out for them, and not vice versa. Accountability checklists are great for this. At WordAgents, again, we have accountability criteria, and our editorial manager is somebody that is running these accountability checks and holding all of our contracts to their word. Okay, we're up to our last slide here. You are the last line of defense and not the freelancer. This is a tough pill to swallow. I know that a lot of content managers want to have expectations of freelancers, that they're always going to deliver a published ready document, and their understanding of the project is aligned with the end user. But at the end of the day, guys, freelancers are motivated by project pay rates, not the goals of the end user. So the solution here is really just to remember that. Your editing team should be aligned with the end user, not the freelancer. Your content strategist or your editorial manager should be responsible for the final SEO optimization of the document. Again, writers don't know SEO at all. And even if they do say they know SEO, they probably don't understand it at the same level that we do. So it's up to the content strategist, content manager to do a final check from an SEO optimization standpoint. And then finally, the editorial manager should be responsible for the final sign-off. Once the final SEO optimization is complete, just from a holistic view, the editorial manager is going to be cross-referencing the briefing against the document, cross-referencing the goals of the end user against the document, whether the end user be your client or your blog post. You may be the end user in certain cases. But bottom line is, freelancers don't have the same amount of skin in the game as you, and you need to remember that. Otherwise, you're going to get burnt. And what's going to happen is you're just going to, assume that the freelancer was reliable enough that you didn't have to dig in and really check their work. But that's, sooner or later, that's going to burn you. And it's better just to systemize this in your workflow, that, you are the last line of defense, and you need to have tasks within your workflow for final, quality assurance checks. All right, so that's everything I got, guys. I don't know how I did on time, Bernard. How'd I do?
Yeah, you did really well. You did really
Okay.
well, and that was a great presentation. I can relate to a lot of the troubles that you brought up during this entire presentation, because I used to manage, I think it was a team between like 20 to 30 different writers. And I remember distinctly around that 8 to 10 writer mark, I was like, oh my God, I need support, right? And so I brought on a content editor, like quality assurance checker, and then had him manage all of the different like things that were going out. We would oftentimes say like, okay, it's time to go fishing for more writers. We'd put up the traps on, at the time it'd be like Elance and Odesk before they merged into like Upwork. Also tried all these other like platforms like Guru, Staff, I don't know, People Per Hour, all of the more classic marketplaces.
It's a common evolution of a content team, but the trigger point is once you start getting super frustrated and you're like, oh, why is this guy not doing it? I've created the briefing perfect, and this is still just so overwhelming. Once you get those feelings, that it's time, that's a trigger to scale. And
yeah. So I like, can see it all in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, and then of course the binding agreements, and then we had everybody do the same assessment, which would be for us, we were writing neighborhood descriptions for different cities. So everybody would submit a neighborhood description for, I think it was like a borough, like Manhattan. And then, like we could all read the same assignment, and then you would have a lot more data points and being like, okay, this one is really good and this one sucks. But if you're handing out different assessments, you won't have like a good gauge on, oh, this one looks really good. In any
I,
case,
I'll give you some numbers on that just so you guys have some context. At WordAgents, we receive anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 applications every quarter. And out of those 5,000 applications, we might keep anywhere between 50 and 80 writers. So you can see, how much filtering we're doing from, the top of our hiring funnel to the bottom. And a large part of that is the evaluations.
totally.
We make writers jump through some hoops to like make some easy cuts, because obviously we're not going to evaluate 5,000 people. But we are spending, we have a whole evaluation team that is dedicated just to doing these evaluations of our applicants.
Yeah, yeah. We do have a couple of interesting questions, and then I have some other interesting follow-ups to those questions, assuming that no other questions slide into the Q&A box or the chat. Nick asks, can you give examples or talk more about missing deadlines and how you punish writers who do that?
Sure. So the way we actually did this, the way we fixed this, believe this or not, was by installing an incentive program. So the incentive program gives the writers an opportunity, if they hit certain milestones or production goals above our baseline expectations, they receive extra pay. So or some kind of bonus. It's going to depend on your organization. So this is very motivating to the writers to actually pay attention to the details, go the extra mile, because there's more money in it for them if they have that ability to receive that incentive. But also we have we have like a 3-strike rule in a given period. So for us, if we have a given writer making 3 like egregious errors in a month, that's gonna trigger a warning. And if they get 2 warnings within a quarter, they're out to the curb. So really, it's I mentioned the accountability checklist, but the accountability checklist is essential to staying on top of your writers. And you got to log the results of the accountability evaluation, because over time you're not going to remember how the writer did on a previous evaluation. So logging these accountability checklists over time is going to give you context on how a writer does over time. And really, it just comes down to the 3-strike rule, or whatever rule you set for your organization. And if they break that within the given time period, it's pretty clear that they're not a good fit for you.
Yeah, great answer. And I guess the follow-on to that, since we're talking about this test, evaluate, revisit concept, we have one from Michael Kyle, who asks, what are the standards for the scoring method that you conduct in that quarterly evaluation or revisiting like thing? Are there specific things that you're screening for? I bet for WordAgents, it's a lot more like high level. Maybe you have, this like rating system, but are there things that at a smaller content operation you can like be evaluating the content writer on?
Yeah, so our evaluation checklist for new writing applicants is just, we try to break it down so that each list item on the checklist can be answered with a yes or no answer, right? So there's no judgment calls in your evaluation criteria. Every single question on the list, it has to be answered yes or no. And then no would be 0, and then yes would be 1 point, and then you tally it up at the end. But we have it broken down into like skill sets. So you have like spelling and grammar, attention to briefing details, formatting, details that they give us just like a giant block of text, or is it formatted appropriately? And we have the evaluation checklist broken down into categories like that, where there's maybe like 4 or 5 questions for each category. So, that's broken down. I think it's into like spelling, grammar, detail orientation, like how close they follow directions, SEO chops, formatting, and I think that's it. Those are the 4 buckets that we evaluate for.
Yeah. And I guess then the follow-up question from John Duffley is, how do you articulate those measures of accountability and quality assurance to short-term freelance writers who may be resistant to critique? Because again, a lot of this is fairly subjective, right? It's like, oh yeah, your formatting is not great. No, right? Ding, ding, ding. It's like, do you
Yeah,
just say like, this is the way it is, or do you get multiple team members involved so that it feels more like a quorum, or how do you navigate that?
sure. So if it depends on how short term is. If it's just a one-off, project, you just want to lay out your expectations in the job post itself, as well as in the agreement that you that you have them sign for the project. That's as basic as it gets, and then it's just up to the freelancer to say yes or no. But hey, if they don't meet all those expectations, then they're in breach of contract, and then you have an actual reason to either discount the pay or not pay them at all if they don't, provide a deliverable that you can use. Obviously, you don't never want to screw over a writer, that they're working too. But those guys out there that just want to do the bare minimum. And again, that's why written contracts are so specific. But beyond that, beyond the one-off project, any type of regularity, you do need your standard operating procedure documents, and that's where you would spell out your expectations over time. And then in that case, the contract would just have the writer agree to your standard operating procedures as they are written, so you can hold them accountable against it.
Yeah. In also alignment with this test, evaluate, revisit, which seems to be the hot subject matter. I have another question from Nick, who asks, how do you handle testing writers? Do you pay them the full rate for a trial article, or how does that work?
Sure. So what we do for testing writers, as part of the application, we ask them if they would feel comfortable creating a 1,000 word sample for us for free. And that's actually one of our ways to quickly eliminate bad actors, people that aren't a good fit for us. Somebody that isn't willing to create a sample for free probably isn't going to be, for WordAgents at least is not going to be a good fit. That could be a different judgment call for you based on your organization. But what happens once they say yes, we follow up and say, hey, we are actually going to pay you. So what we do is we usually do a half rate compared to our normal rates for writers. And for us, for most of our writers, they start at like $30 per 1,000 words. So we're paying them like 15, 20 bucks for the test article. And as long as they submit it, whether we accept them or not, we're paying that fee. So yeah, we do have a little bit of a budget, especially for those writers that we pay to test but don't actually hire. I don't know how feasible that would be for everybody, but for the most part, you don't have to pay a test applicant a full rate, but you should give them something, something just for their time, just to indicate that you're a real business and you're interested in actually providing them a real income. So some kind of stipend for the test article goes a long way if you end up hiring the writer for the long term.
Totally. I have actually an interesting question for you as somebody who has managed like 10 to 20 different writers. Number one, like what I've learned is that great writers are oftentimes not on the market. And I suppose this might be a better like paradigm for, subject matter expert versus generalist or something like that. And when we were running our content operations, when we struck gold with somebody who just at the time before content optimization tools were a thing, right? Some writers just did it well and some writers just didn't do it well. And so you would quickly be able to suss out like, okay, this writer is really good. And we would immediately try to move them off market as quickly as possible, right? So somebody would come in, we do a trial. I posted the example of a screening that we would do. In our case, we would just pay people the same rate because we were looking to just attract as many like applicant trials as possible. And we didn't have as wide of a pool that Vin gets at WordAgents. So if you're just like browsing through the listings, it's unlikely that somebody worth their salt is gonna right like go and be like, okay, yeah, I'll write you this free trial like article just to get work, right? Because demand for digital content has also been on the rise. And we would then say, okay, this person's really good. And after we did that, we'd say, okay, how many hours or how many pieces of content can you create every week comfortably? And oftentimes what we realize is that as a writer, what they're looking for is consistent work, right? Because it's very tiring for them to rinse and repeat through different people, different agencies, different writing platforms that they could be working on. And we wanted to take them off market. What that also counters is this idea of missing deadlines, because oftentimes they're going to miss deadlines because they got a better offer from another person in the ecosystem that's looking for digital content, right? They're submitting applications to write this $250 blog post or this $100. And if you're the $100 blog post, they're going to do the $250 one over your $100 one. So my question then is, you were talking about how revisiting your queue, you fire the bottom 10%, right? Like a concept that I think was popularized by GE. But what about this other flip side, right? Like where it's a concept that's popularized by Netflix, which is to say, okay, what if you have like stellar outperform, like people that just nail it every single time, and you've negotiated them at, we'll call it $250 an article. Now, do you go back and revisit your top 10% or top 20% and kind of give them the right incentives, lest right somebody else comes along and they poach them from your ecosystem or from your project? Is that like a part of your process?
So, there's a lot to unpack there. So first and foremost, it all comes down to need. At WordAgents, we have a never-ending queue of available work for writers. So we need full-time, long-term writers. And for us, that works out because freelancers are generally looking for consistency. They're looking for reliability in their paycheck. So when it comes to SMEs and content marketing programs that don't have that same level of need for ongoing work, yeah, it's a give and take. Like you are at a disadvantage there because you can't leverage consistent paychecks. You can't leverage incentive programs in the same way. Specifically when it comes to subject matter experts, if we're just talking about a need for a handful of them, especially in the SEO world, all of us SEOs are looking for thought leader writers that can write for our blogs, right? And that we can position us as SEOs. Those guys, the way I do that is I just type in my keyword into Google. I set the date range to the past year, and I pull the top 100 articles, and I'm pulling the author names out of there, and I'm pitching them one by one because I know those guys know their stuff, and they're capable of doing it. So that's usually how I'm sourcing SMEs. I've abandoned the idea of building SME teams that are scalable a long time ago because that's very, very difficult. The alternative is really the generalist writer plus the expert evaluator that I talked about in one of the slides. But incentivizing top 10% of a subject matter expert team, that's a tough question, man. I don't know. I think it's really going to be determined by the need, by how much work you can offer them. And you really just got to get creative with the incentives. What's going to make your project more attractive than another project? If you can't pay them more, what else can you offer them? Can you offer them a byline? Can they share the article in their portfolio? You know, you just got to get creative and see what other intangible value you can provide to the writer to land them beyond just, you know, paying them more dollars that might be out of budget for you.
Totally, totally. Yeah. It's a tough one because we saw some of our best writers just disappear as writers typically do. It's like
Yeah.
just one they just stop submitting content, right? And
But that goes back to the revisit step, right? You know, like freelance writers are freelancers. It's not their career. They're not going to be doing this, you know, as long as me and you are going to be operating our businesses. They, you know, some guys want to do it for a week and stop and never do it again. Some guys want to be here for 3 months and they'll disappear. I have writers that have been with me since 2011 or 12, and they just never go away. But you're never going to know who's the reliable guy and who is the one you got to keep an eye on unless you're reevaluating over time and consistently according to a schedule.
yeah, yeah. All right, a couple of questions around the project management aspects of this entire process.
Sure.
Number one, do you consider formatting an article a project management task? I am assuming this means like, you know, taking it, making the headers bold, putting in the images, that kind of thing. And then similarly to this, right? We're at over the 8 to 10 writer mark. How much content do you think a managing editor should on your full-time team should comfortably be working through? Is that predetermined or based on total word count or per article? What are your thoughts on these more project management related things?
Sure. So the formatting question. So we include formatting requirements in our writer directions. So that there is an aspect, you know, a responsibility on the writer to, you know, format, you know, use proper headings, use subsections, include your unordered lists, use bold italics if necessary. You know, use the proper heading, you know, element and not just like bold and increase the font size to get to the same spot, like rules like that. But our writers are not publishing the work on our WordPress dashboard or the client site. So that's the responsibility of either like an implementer, like a content poster, or the editor themselves, whoever is responsible for publishing the content. We all know that, you know, there's formatting errors when you copy paste from Google Docs or Word into WordPress. So there's some additional formatting steps there. Those specific formatting steps should not be on the writer's plate. They should format the article within the word processor, and then whoever's implementing the article on site is going to do the final formatting. And that's either like a content implementer poster role or like the editor team leader role. So secondarily, the second question, how many articles can an editorial manager handle and reviews? So again, just for clarity, editorial manager, that's going to be the person running your content marketing program. So this is like the head honcho. Beneath them are the editors, the team leaders, the content posters, the writers. So my editorial manager at WordAgents was still doing quality assurance tasks up until like 20 to 25 writers, because the articles were going through from the writer to the editor, and they were only reaching the editorial manager if there was an issue and it was beyond the editor's capabilities, or they needed, you know, another set of eyes. So, you know, only a small percentage of our queue is actually hitting the editorial manager. So I would say when we were at 20 to 25 writers, that really stressed the hell out of our editorial manager. So I would say like more reasonable is probably like 10 to 15 writers. And then what happens at that point is we developed a quality assurance team. So now that any suspect articles that, you know, our editors don't feel are up to par, they get siphoned off to the quality assurance team. And this kind of who's actually made up of our top 10% of writers, believe it or not. So that kind of talks back to what we were talking about before. But the QA team is like special ops. They go in and they're surgical. and they're really polishing up the article. So we kind of delegated that from the editorial manager over to the QA team.
All right, one final question for you, Vin. Back to vetting writers. When vetting writer applications, what do you usually look for? During the application process, do you ask them to submit an article based on a prompt you provide, or do you wait until they've made it past the initial vetting round to ask for them to submit a writing sample?
Cool. So again, we get a high volume of applicants, so it's very important that we install hoops for the applicants to jump through, just for them to show us how interested they are in the position. This is something I totally stole from Noah Kagan. Like he had like a process for writing job descriptions and creating these hoops, and I've used it, for 5, 6, 7 years now, and it works to this day. So we on the application, we have a number of yes or no questions. The questions are formatted in a way that if they say no, they disqualify themselves. So and all the applications go to a Google Sheet. So we can just we can block out any no answers, so we don't even see them. We don't even have to waste time looking at them. We also have them include 2 to 3 existing live samples of previously written work. We're not evaluating those samples that they provide at all. That's just to see, again, do they have experience? Are they able to share their work? Are they proud of, do they have pride in it? And are they following the application directions that require them to submit 2 to 3 samples? So if they submit it, they get a pass mark for that application task and move to the next step. But we are not evaluating those samples. The people that make it to the next step are the ones that we're reaching out to and saying, hey, you indicated that you do want to, will create a 1,000 word test assignment. And we would like to move forward at this point. And then we send those emails out, send those offers out, and you get, a certain percentage saying yes. And that percentage are the ones that are offered the paid test assignment.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I know exactly that blog post. At the time, I was like, oh, of course, this is a no-brainer, because Noah Kagan specifically has these things where it's like right in the email subject line, blah, blah, blah. And then he creates a filter in Gmail that's like, if subject line does not include blah, 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 like automatically put it into the trash. And I know this because I think it was when one of my first startups was failing, I really looked up to Noah Kagan as well. And so I went through the meticulous process of doing everything. I copy wrote this thing. I ran ads against AppSumo and estimated conversions. And I remember I got into a meeting with him because I wrote this email that was like, how I've already made AppSumo $65 or something. And that's why you should hire me as your marketing person. And at that time, he had just laid off almost all his staff. So it wasn't a particularly good time, but check out the article. I put it in chat.
I mean, you've got the right idea, Bernard, and to everybody that's watching this, your hiring funnel needs to have, you need to give as much attention to your hiring funnel as you give to your sales funnel. Because at some point, you're going to start to reach a point where you can't find the level and the amount of talent that you need to scale to the level you want it to be at. So your hiring funnel, you have to present yourself in a way that's attractive to your talent in the same way that you present yourself in a way that's attractive to your potential clients. And if you approach, talent the same way you approach clients, that, there's going to be a whole bunch of them at the top of the funnel, and the cream of the crop are going to come out the bottom of the funnel. You're going to have a really good system for reliable talent over the course, the lifetime of your content marketing program.
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much, Vin. I do want to point out that he's offering everybody here a nice special content offer. You can use WordAgents, get started with a 1,000 word blog post for only $10. Enter the code $110 ClearScope at checkout. And again, WordAgents is a turnkey solution if you're looking for high quality vetted American writers. So definitely check them out. But again, make sure to arm WordAgents writers with the correct brief, the tone of voice, the target and secondary keywords, so that you're going to get higher quality content back on average. Anything else that you want to conclude with, Vin?
Just to add on to that, we also optimize with ClearScope too. So if you're a ClearScope fan, we can optimize your articles with the suggestion that ClearScope makes. So, but no, this was a great time. I had a great time chatting with you, and I appreciate being here, Bernard. So thank you.
Yes. I'll follow up with you shortly after the call. And again, thanks for everyone tuning in. Appreciate your time.
Take care now.